It feels strange to say I never drew before last February. Partly because that's not entirely true. I did draw, like most kids. I colored, I doodled on notes in college. Although, looking back at my notes, I did less doodling and more just writing in like the margins of my notes. I doodled every now and again. In high school, like there'd be one thing that I drew well and then I could never do it again type of scenario. I used art at least at one time as part of a grieving process. When I was in college, I took an art class. It wasn't a drawing class, it was a color and design class. So it was less about, techniques and more about use of color and designs. So I had some pieces that I did pretty well. I was definitely not an artist in any way, shape, or form at that point. And I wouldn't say I was an artist when I started drawing in February. Before this whole calendar journey started, there were times where I had a very specific scene in my head that I wanted to be able to draw, but I didn't have any of the skills to do that, and I would just get frustrated and after attempting for a while just give up because I was trying to start at the end of the journey. I think because of that, I convinced myself that I wasn't good at drawing and I was incapable of being good at drawing. When this whole thing started with an impromptu trip to the store to buy a calendar because I needed a way to keep myself motivated to continue with my creative challenge that I had set for myself, I was bad. Like, February does not look good. It looks like a 5-year-old did it in most cases. Although even in that first month, like there were like little snippets of like, oh yeah, I did that pretty well. Like that actually looks like what I was intending to make. One thing I've known I can draw with crayons for a while is sunsets. Like color gradients, I got you. Trying to actually draw a specific shape, especially with crayons, not so much. And I was fine with that because I wasn't treating my calendar like a work of art. It was, oh, I'm just gonna do a little quick doodle. Like, hey, I reached my goals for today. Good job, me. Then something dramatic happened in March. Well, a couple dramatic things happened in March. The first was that I stopped drawing with crayons and I started drawing with colored pens. Technique and skills still aren't all the way there at this point. Boy, is your precision amazing with a pen when you've been trying and trying to be precise with a lump of wax. I still occasionally drew something with a crayon because I didn't have like a full rainbow of pens. At that point, I had like 8 or 9 colors. So there were just some things that like I needed more of a gradient for. And that's I think when I became an ink convert. The second dramatic thing that happened in March was that I started drawing fan art. And I didn't realize when I drew that fan art and put it on Twitter with the hashtags and everything, how much that would change so many things. I'd have to say that piece of fan art might be the first thing that I drew that I'm like honestly proud of because it came out the way I envisioned it to come out. That hadn't happened a lot. April was the advent of markers. I also did more experimentation with something that I discovered in March back with that first piece of fan art that is using the negative space. Basically all I did was I would draw what I wanted to be white in pencil and then colored everything that wasn't pencil and erased. And it came out pretty cool every time I did that, so it works. I started doing lettering in my sketches in March, but April is when I started drawing pattern on days that I didn't have a super strong image for, which happened a lot. And I drew some actual fully pencil pieces in April. May is when the fan art really started to take over. May is also when I worked up the courage to start drawing faces. As you can tell, they're not great. At least the one I made creepy on purpose because, you know, it's a little demon-possessed halfling girl. So, like, I was kind of okay with the Uncanny Valley being on that one because she's supposed to be creepy. One thing I would definitely say in May, I was good at drawing anthropomorphic birds and robots. Human faces, not so much. By June, I'd definitely fallen into a pattern. I started to find a style. I'd say that's still early to say, like, I have a super defined style, because even now, I'm not sure I would say I have a super defined style, because I try to, you know, push and experiment with things, as you'll see in later in the video when I get to January. It's also worth noting that June is when I started drawing not on my calendar. Now, I was drawing mostly fan art that wasn't on my calendar, but that was when I fully acknowledged that, like, hey, drawing isn't just something I'm using to keep myself accountable to the internet. It's something I actually enjoy and want to get better at, because I noticed I was. Honestly, probably my proudest moment in July is the little black-eyed Susan I drew on the first day of the month. That was the first thing I drew in ink that I didn't sketch in pencil first. I just freehanded it. I didn't want line art for it, I just wanted it to be soft. I haven't done a ton of that, partly because of confidence, and I think that's something I could stand to stretch myself with. It's a little hard, like, in these middle months to really see the improvement because I'm stretching myself so much. As soon as I'm getting like, oh, I'm a little comfortable with this, I'm pushing myself to try harder things. Not just for the sake of growing, like, because I truly wanted to be better. And I had a lot of fun and kind of acknowledged, like, hey, not everything is going to be great. Like, sometimes I just want to spend 5 minutes on a drawing. I will say that drawing of Evelyn on the last day of the calendar is probably the cutest Evelyn I've ever drawn. Somehow I've, like, forgotten how to draw her in the past few months. I need to get back to that little cutie. I'd say August is when I finally started getting really comfortable with drawing people. I'm drawing people a lot more in August. They're not the greatest. Sometimes my drawings still look a little bit like this, but I've definitely improved as far as people go. I'd say that's probably, like, the most distinct, marked improvement. Clearly, I have no idea how hands work. September, I was just having fun. There isn't anything that I look at in September that I think, oh, that's horrible, which that might be the first month I have that. Like, there's some, it's like, okay, that's not great, but, you know, animals just look derpy when you're drawing them in marker. That's just a fact. I think I was having the most fun when I was drawing sad fan art, which tracks, considering my first fan art was very sad. I need to draw more happy things. That might be the lesson here. Although that little lizard person breathing lightning is a super happy drawing, and I'm pretty proud of that one. So I can draw happy things. I just enjoy drawing the sad things too. Just get all the emotions out there on the page. Now, October was a serious month of drawing. I attempted Inktober. I didn't do 31 black ink drawings because that was kind of my goal. So I say attempted because I didn't do 31 Inktober drawings, but I did 31 calendar drawings for October. I did Inktober. I did so much drawing in October. October was also the birth of what I now call Cartoon Amber. She started in the black ink drawings for Inktober, but she also made a couple appearances on the calendar here, and she'll continue to show up. I said, like, June was when I acknowledged that drawing was something I wanted to cultivate as a skill, not just as a, oh, I'm keeping track of my creative accomplishments. Accomplishments is the wrong word, but my creative endeavor for my year of creativity that ended at the beginning of November. So November was the first time that the calendar drawings didn't mean anything. For the previous 9 months, I wasn't drawing on my calendar until I had done work on at least one, most of the time 2 or more creative projects that weren't drawing. So November was the first time that the calendar sketches didn't mean anything else. They were just drawings of for that day. So I think part of why some of the quality improvement happened in November was because I was giving my brain a break. I wasn't like, no, you have to edit a video on this day, or you have to film, or you have to stream, or you have to do this, do this, do this, this, blah. I was just drawing. I'd say November was when I started pushing myself on form and trying to have more dynamic movement in my drawings. I had some before, but I'd say this is when I kind of started to get it and how, anatomy works, even in cartoony people. Like, anatomy still has to sort of function. I will say, like, even still in November, not all my drawings are good. I still have some just meh. I wasn't putting a lot of effort into it. I was just trying to get a drawing for that day, which happens when you're drawing every day. I did get back to doing some pretty cool lettering. I did this one in negative space. I thought about leaving the letters white, but then I wanted to do like kind of the green flame thing. D&D fans will get it. Probably the biggest change in December is I discovered how much fun it is to draw fire. Cartoon fire is fun, and I try to include it in a lot more pieces now. I also, in December, remembered just how much fun anthropomorphic animals are and branched away from, just the bird. That I think was the only anthropomorphic animal I'd really drawn previous to that. Like, I'd drawn animals, but they were animals. December is also when I challenged myself to fit as many characters as I could into one tiny calendar square. It was technically 9, because 2 of them weren't humanoid. That's so many people. I'm honestly proud that doesn't look like more of a mess than it does. And now we get to January. New month, new year, new calendar. An unexpected hurdle with the new calendar was how the squares were formatted. The squares are bigger on this new calendar than with my old calendar, so I'm able to put a little more detail into my drawings because I'm drawing them a little bigger and can fit more in them. But the downside to the new calendar and the bigger squares is the numbers are also bigger and they're centered in the squares rather than, tucked up in the corner where I can kind of ignore them. A funny thing that happened is about halfway through the month, I realized I had just drawn people in it on every day of the month. Why not continue that for the month? Make January People Month? And you could say I fudged it a little bit with the elephant and hippo on the 15th, but they're anthropomorphic, so they still count as people. There are a few drawings of this month that I'm really proud of. I'm probably the most proud of the really sad, slightly gory picture of Paulton, and also the spooky tiefling, because the other 2 drawings that I'd say I'm really proud of came out really well. I was drawing straight from references, like Obsidian from Steven Universe. I just looked at a screenshot of Obsidian and drew it. I'm really proud of how it came out. In Carmen Sandiego, I was drawing from a poster I found online of promo art. That also has 0 line work, so I'm really proud of it, but those 2 are ones that I had a visual representation of the thing I was drawing, that I could look at, whereas Paulton and the tiefling I was making up. I'm also pretty proud of the ladder slide from earlier in the month, just because of how the technical aspect of figuring out how his form works for someone who's riding a ladder on the slide. I watched the gif of Belle from Beauty and the Beast so many times to figure that drawing out. It's not even funny. Also, that drawing of me carrying an absurdly large stack of books from the 4th just because it's pretty freaking adorable. I am far from an accomplished artist. It's still a little uncomfortable for me to say I am an artist, even though I clearly am. Like, I draw every day, even though it's not, like, worthy of being sold or anything like that. Making art is what makes you an artist, just like writing something is what makes you a writer. You don't have to be published to be a writer, even though that's kind of what the world views as, like, that's when you've made it, is when other people find your work worth promoting and giving you money for. That's not what defines you. Other people finding worth in what you do is not what makes you what you are. That's a really important thing for you to know, and this turned into some kind of positive self-help video somehow. I don't know. I think I say these things because I need to hear them, so I know other people need to hear them, because shocker, you're not the only person who feels the way you feel. It's amazing, and probably the only reason any of us know that is because of the internet and books. So yay. I'm not accomplished, but I'm growing. And I think what happens with these pictures I'm really proud of, that's me glimpsing how good I could be, even though, like, my standard isn't there yet. Like, now I'd say my standard is where my reach goals were a few months ago. So I'm really excited to see where my reach goals will be once these drawings I'm really proud of are the standard. It's gonna be a fun journey, and that's kind of the point. I'm having a lot of fun with drawing, and I hope you're having fun watching me. I could probably ramble a whole lot more about drawing, but none of it will make any sense, and this video is probably long enough anyway. How long have I been recording? Oh, I've been recording for almost an hour. Oh boy. If you like what you see, you know what to do. YouTube works the way it's worked for a while now. I assume you are somewhat familiar with this site we're on. If not, I'll have descriptions below for things I may have talked about throughout this video. If you want to support my creative endeavors, I'll also have a link down there for my Ko-fi account. That's nothing that I ever push, but you know, every little bit helps. I'm hoping to move this year, and you need money to do that. Also to buy a car, so there's that. Thanks for listening to me ramble, guys.